Hey, you. I titled this something along the lines of The Battle for Africa in Angola. War, what is it good for? And what did we win? We won absolutely nothing. We could argue that we won battles and that we were strategically this or we were tactically that, but we won nothing. Okay, we, humanity, the collective, won nothing. And I don't think that any war has ever won us anything. Rather, it has always been to take away things from us, whether it be the lives of our young men and women, the souls of our young people, the earnings of our taxpayers, the rapacious legislation that tends to follow. There are always supporters of either team who will say, we scored a certain victory, even if we lost the game, we were the better sportsmen, so for that reason we are still great. As a 19-year-old boy, I was required to do national service. Well, I was required to do it from the age of 17, actually. I think you could go a little bit younger than that, but once you were finished high school, you were required to do 2 years. That time have changed at various stages in the history of the white South African story. So before my 18th birthday, I was doing my basic training, and by my 19th birthday, by my 18th birthday, I had taken responsibility as a troop commander for a troop of vehicles that looked like this. 4 vehicles, 12 in a squadron and 4 in a troop. A troop commander typically would be up here in the turret. This turret hatch is closed by now. You can see that. In here, in this hatch, would be the gunner inside of the turret and the driver. In my case, my driver his name was David. My gunner's name is Herbert. And Herbert got in touch with me 2 weeks ago. I hadn't been in touch with him for 31 years. We owe each other our lives. There is no doubt about that. In the back of the vehicle, there was a room here for infantrymen on either side of the vehicle. This vehicle has a name, it's called a rattle, which also in English would be a honey badger. The honey badger is known for its vicious bite and really powerful claws. This is about 20 tons of vehicle. These tires are so heavy and large, it took at least 2, perhaps 3 of us just to lift them up onto their side and fix them. It was quite an ordeal. There's a spare one on the top, and it needs the engine hatch covers back here. But there's plenty of room in here for, well, not that much room, but there's space for 9 soldiers to be in the back. But we never had any in the back because we were Armored Corps guys. We'd learned our craft at the School of Armor or at Special Services Battalion 1 or Special Services Battalion 2 up in Zeerust. Anyway, this is the vehicle that I was in command of. It's a 90mm cannon, and there's a 7.62 Browning machine gun mounted here, and a second one would be mounted here for me to use on targeting. So this is the vehicle that I was given charge of, and as a troop commander, I was second in charge of a troop of 4 of those vehicles and the 12 souls that were in them. We spent a year then up in, well, we were posted to a country called Southwest Africa. At the time, it's now known as Namibia. And we were right on a border. We were on a sort of tent, in a tent encampment called 6-1 Mechanized Battalion. This is the logo of 6-1 Mechanized Battalion. It was a very, very powerful, fast attack strike unit that had, I don't know, 300-400 soldiers in total as complement, and it was infantry, mechanized infantry, mechanized artillery. They had these howitzer 155 on a 6-wheel or 8-wheel unit that was so successful, and that's another story. We had anti-aircraft and mining capacities and anti-tank capacities and so on. But this was the heaviest armor we took into Angola later that same year in 1987, when the Angolan government sent down, I believe, something in the region of 12 brigades. A brigade is said to be about 2,000 men in strength, and it can vary depending on the makeup of the brigade. Some of them are more infantry based, and others are more mechanized or armor based, and would have perhaps fewer people. I think I should add at this point that, we're doing what we're doing because we're being told that our country has got a grave risk of being overrun by communism. Remember, this is in the this conflict started in the 70s, really, and it stems out of the Portuguese leaving Angola in the 1960s, and in the power vacuum that ensues, the CIA and the KGB and the Cubans are involved. I think probably the Israelis are involved as usual. They certainly are later on. And the British, of course. And there's a lot of oil in Africa, and there's a lot of oil in Angola. And there's a lot of interest in controlling the greater geopolitical landscape, and I'm sure this is all just a part of that. In South Africa, the white boys had to do, black people were treated terribly, in some instances very terribly. And the law was definitely written, in favor of the white guy, but the white guy, who was, I know now, it was being propagandized, much like the Jew is propagandized in Israel to think that they're somehow special, more special than everyone else. So it was with the white guy in South Africa. The British had put in place a system that had them sitting atop a pile. But as part of that responsibility, white boys had to do 2 years of national service, and whilst I wasn't really that interested in the army, I was a patriot. I cared for my country, and I still care for, the people who live there or live anywhere, really. But I was very much indoctrinated into the national anthem and, the sense of national identity. Even though I was born in, England, I was raised in South Africa, and that was my sense of identity, of course. Didn't really want to go to the army, but the call-up papers came and I went. I did my bit, and I got into trouble during my training period of time. I was on officer training course, and I was, going AWOL some nights to go to a casino and do some gambling. I was 18 at the time, and, just wanting to have a bit of fun. So I got thrown off the officer course and put on the non-commissioned officer course, which was a relief in a way, because I got something out of all that work I put in to it. And then I got sent on this posting to this base very far north of where we were from, and so it was that I was part of this interesting and formidable unit called 6-1 Mechanized Battalion, and they were called in July of 1987, to prepare for an imminent attack by these down-rushing thousands of Russian-backed Angolan soldiers. Now, we didn't know much about them, but for the propaganda that we were being given, we knew they had a fairly respectable air defense system, because the Russians were putting some of their best technology, their air technology, like anti-aircraft systems, like the SA-8 or SAM-8, I think we called it at the time, SAM-7, I forget now, but this was high-end technology for the 1980s, and the Americans were said to be very keen to get hold of one of these missile systems. And then by September of that year, we had my squadron and I had actually tasted battle for the first time. And then, we had our sort of warm-up contacts, and other guys had other battles and so on, but we were sort of pocking at 3 or 4 brigades that were positioned on and around this river Lomba, the Lomba River, and they were gaining a bit of ground. They were making headway onto the south bank of this Lomba River, which we were sort of defending. Very, very dense bush conditions, very dense, very hard to move around, which is why the military preferred to have wheeled vehicles like these than the tracked vehicles, the tanks. We didn't have any tanks up with us, although we were due to face Russian tanks, thankfully older variant. But this had been how it was for a few weeks in September, and then I think the 1st or the 2nd of October we tried to have a go at this brigade, the 47th Brigade, and we couldn't find them, or we missed them on this first attempt. So the 3rd of October rolled around, and we were like, getting ready for battle, and it would become part of our normal, to prepare for a potential contact, and by this time in the morning, it's now 5:30. I mean, we were, hours underway. We'd normally set off by 4 in the morning or whatever, perhaps earlier, to make our way slowly towards a target, potential target area. And on this morning, things sort of fell into alignment such that we ended up clashing with this 47th Brigade through the course of the entire day. Tank battle, tank contact, and after tank contact, and dug in trenches and so on. And we battled over a fairly small patch of ground, relatively small patch of ground alongside of this river, until about 3 in the afternoon, when we finally broke the back of this brigade and they fled across the river. Those that were surviving fled across the river. There was no crossing, apparently. They had to kind of abandon vehicles in the river, and abandoned a lot of vehicles, including some of these anti-aircraft systems that the Americans were so keen on. I'm told by people that they went via Israel through to America, because they're all in the same bed. If you don't know that, then you need to review everything you've learned, like I did a few years ago. Because I got the opportunity. This was a monumental day. There was death on both sides of the peace. It's historically recognized that the 47th Brigade failed ceased to exist after this battle. It was no longer There was no longer a recognized military force. The stragglers of the brigade were mopped up by the 16th or the 57th Brigade, who had been coming in to support them, but to no avail. Now, I mean, I say these things with a degree of kind of nonchalance, shall we say, but it has been 30 years, 31 years today, since this battle. And I can still remember moments of it like it's still happening for me now. Bombs landing on and around my vehicle. RPG, the rocket propelled grenades coming straight at my face. Tanks moving onto my position and instructing my gunner to target that tank or those tanks. So, it's something that, I've had to contend with over the years, something that, like with most military veterans, or most people who've been through trauma, actually oftentimes will seek to kind of, barely deal with it and so on. That was probably the case for me too, actually. And then 7 years ago, my mother died on the 1st of November 2011 after a short battle with motor neuron disease. She was only 67 years old, and I and my wife spent some time caring for her and getting involved in the medical system such that it is to try and help care for her. And I was obviously very distraught going through that and seeing my healthy mother go from that healthy person to a vegetative state, not mentally but physically, in a very short space of time, and be failed. But for me, caring for her, and it was pretty much a full-on thing for a little while, because I went back to South Africa. Initially, I wrote a blog, or a blog called A Month with Mom. And that I wrote in May of 2011. And it was noticeable to me that people were interested in my writing and my style of writing, as well as obviously being gripped by the story. And but then I cared for my mom for a little while before she died, and she was so unwell, and she could not swallow, and she was choking to death, and every now and again, maybe a few times an hour, or maybe just once an hour, she needed to be suctioned down her throat. We needed to get a suction machine down there and pull the phlegm back out of her throat so that she could breathe. And she couldn't move any part of her body but for one finger and this wrist. And so that bell there, I attached to my mom's arm. So she just had to move her arm to call me. But that time was like going back in the trenches for me. Going back to war. It was like really being back at war. And it had served the purpose of ripping back much of the what's the word I mean? Complacency. Ripping back the complacency that had descended upon me in the years since 1987. After the war, no one gave a shit. No one cared. And you just had to kind of fit back into the system and become a system clone and do the system things and play their games, eat their sport and drink their poison. But my mom's horror, and she was brave, very brave, but my mom's horror turned something back on, something that had been alive in me in 1987 as a 19-year-old boy seeking to survive, a form of hell that had been descended upon me and those around me. One which I knew I had to go forward in order to get through it. There didn't seem to be an option of walking away from my troop, my squadron, my unit, 6-1 Mechanized Battalion. And my country, and in fact, all of what I believe to be the capitalist kind of construct that I was proud to be a part of versus the communist construct that I had been taught was something so evil. And so there was no way I was leaving, but for when my time was up at the end of December, or the early part of December of 1987. But when my mom died in 2011, I came back to England. I'd already had trouble with my government job. I wasn't fitting in very well anymore. And I'd taken on a period, I'd been trying to do some consulting in that field, in the government space. But, square peg, round hole. And so in the next year, in 2012, I started looking back at my past and my military, and I found out that there were some Facebook groups that had started up dealing with that. And in short order, I got involved in some conversations, and one day I came across a photograph of a destroyed one of these rattles. They'd been blown up. And I happened to be there when that rattle was blown up, so I was able to write a little bit of an account about how that came to be. We were bombed by MiGs, Russian MiG-21s. They found us on the 8th of October. This is 5 days after today. About 7 or 8 in the morning, and that's one of those moments that seared into my mind forever, and I wrote about it. And my goodness, did I get a wonderful response. People were really interested in, that story, and did I have anything else. So I wrote a few more stories that ended up laying down the chapters of this book. This book I sort of wrote, I guess, in 2013. It was published by a British publisher called Helion in 2014. Oh, that MMM is this here, which stands for Military Merit Medal. The British call it the Military Merit, MM. And it's a post-nominal thing. I discovered this about 3 months before this book went to print. I never received my medals. I never sought them out. I wasn't interested in any of that stuff after my time ended at the war. They did offer me to stay for another year. Did I want to stay in the battle zone? Fuck. I mean, I think that I know that my crew and I did do very brave things in battle, because I saw people do less than brave things, and so I know there is a distinction. I'm not one of those people who's like, well, you went, and you should all get the same kind of medal. If you're in a system like that, then there are people who do different things. My medal, the MMM, as I said, I found out just a few years ago, but I was, and my gunner has only just come back into my life, so he will bear this out. I haven't had a conversation with him about any of this stuff because, unfortunately for me, I've moved on from what I see as ground level mind control. This is ground level mind control. Getting people to go and kill each other. It's the ground level stuff. And blaming it on oil, blaming it on greed, blaming it on inept governments and corrupt despots. That's all ground level stuff, friends. And up until a few years ago, that's how I saw this. So I was, I kind of went along with this. I mean, if you ever were to read this book, not that I'm trying to sell you a copy of this book, because the publishers and Amazon get most of the money. I get very, very little. Unless I sell this myself. Well, this copy is going to the gunner. This is going to Herbert Zeely. I'm going to sign this copy today and send this to my gunner. Well, I call him my gunner. That's in my mind how he's always been. He's a man and a human, and he's got a family and 2 boys and some grandchildren now, I think. I'm in this picture, by the way. Here. This is a destroyed Russian tank. I think this picture is taken in September. So this is before we actually do this big battle on the Lomba. But I haven't really spoken to my gunner to point this out, that when it comes to defending the righteous, then I'm willing to do that, and I've shown that. This is the 31st anniversary of this battle. There are anniversaries of battles pretty much every day of the year, so I'm not asking you to get your hankies out. I respect that people have put their entire lives and given their entire lives, and I've lost friends alongside of me for giving their lives for their country, whether they believed in what they were doing or not. And on the other side of the battlefield, the same story. And if the stats are to believe, then in our case, the numbers of dead are just so grossly imbalanced. However, there's been many hundreds of thousands and millions of men and boys and women killed in battle. And to this day, humankind is fighting some kind of battle in which millions are still being killed. Perhaps it's the weapons labs that are making the poisons that come through our food chain. Perhaps it's other toxins that are finding their way into our atmosphere. Perhaps it's by the TV and the sports and the end-to-end entertainment for your mind. I think you'd rather be a contributor, in my humble or my short experience of being a proud veteran, because when I started to realize that the entire edifice of government is corrupt to not so much the individual lowly government official, because like me, I just did my job, and sometimes I heard things that I knew weren't for public consumption, not that anyone was ever going to listen to me if I had to repeat that, and whatever I heard was pretty low level stuff, I'm sure. Same was true when I was in the military. We heard things and saw things that we knew were not being made public. Our battles weren't being made public, for example. But the public perception is one of, we must go along with it. We must do what's required, and the government sort of knows best, even if the incumbents are a bunch of muppets. The next lot will be better. I'm sure that the opposition party will choose someone better. And I was very optimistic about South Africa when the changeover happened, even though it came as quite a surprise to me, because I didn't think that, given my experience of how powerful the South African Defence Force was, I didn't think that the South African government was in any way needing to kind of release its grip on power, and it had the support of the Americans. I mean, the CIA were alongside us back in Angola, not working with us, but working with the UNITA boys. The as they normally do, is supporting the rebels to destabilize the government. Syria, Iran, perhaps, but certainly it seems how they've done it in Gaddafi land and Saddam land. Just by the right way, I don't think that Saddam actually has to die. Although in our narrative he dies and is hung by the neck. That could be theater. Okay. And me saying this type of shit doesn't make me popular with the veterans, because the veterans and the military boys are the big order followers. They love all of this. And for them, there is still a really, when I went, my cannon got so hot, it changed color. It was brown and it changed color to pink. Willing to do that for your country because you believe so much in all of this nonsense. And I don't hold these up to be disrespectful for the things that you've earned, because apparently I earned these too, okay? So quid pro quo. If this is upsetting you, tough. You've been lied to by your government. If you think you have your government, you're mistaken. There is no your government. As I said right at the beginning of this, we never win, because we are not the winners. We are not writing the history. We are not writing the history. I hear a lot of black folks nowadays. I'm paying attention to what's going on at Speaker's Corner and so on. I hear a lot of black folks. I say black in color, and some might say they're African blacks, or some might say they're South American, or American black skinned people. They could also argue that they were English people because they've always lived here, or there are 1 or 2 generations of living here. Whatever, I'm just identifying them by the tone of their skin. To me, we're all one human race, one race, not black race and white race. That's bullshit. There is only one human race. But people identify themselves very much by their color, and I didn't realize how much We got the white boy Tommy Robinson kind of mindset going on, shaven headed, skin headed, wash fucking what English will, and then you got all these black boys going, we're the gang, we're the fucking, we got to, and it's against the white man. Now, what the fuck are you talking about? Since when did I fucking do any of this? If you believe that the white man is your enemy or your problem, then you're believing white man propaganda. Isn't that ironic? The ANC, the African National Congress in South Africa, is not for black. Okay? That idea that they're for black is just a cloak that these system operators wear in order to maintain the kind of tension between groups, because it's this tension that gets them to pull us all in a particular direction, And I mean, the white South African example of, is this going to suit you? Well, it might do if you're in one of those industries that it suits the government for you to be, still be in power, or you're able to kind of, with your wealth, buy some sort of protection from, what the system would rather have, and that is that pretty much everybody is in a lower middle class or a lower, of income, and that the wealth and control is in fewer and fewer hands. I admit that, once upon a time, I thought that when they say history is written by the victors, that meant that it was being written by the British Empire, and that the British Empire was me. I know of the Queen, and I know the British national anthem, and I was born in England, as I said, and heck, that's surely me, isn't it? But it's not. It's not me, and it's not you. And no matter what you look like, if you're listening to this, you're more than likely not the system. And it's the system who has controlled the minds of the masses across all of the world. I will say this to you, that all governments are under license. They're essentially, it's a, what do they call it? When you buy into a franchise, it's a franchise, basically. If your family was wealthy enough and powerful enough, 150 years ago, you were 200 years ago, depending on what part of the world you're talking about, then you would be in line possibly to buy the franchise for a country. And, you can kind of run it pretty much any way you like. There are certain guidelines and certain fees that need to be paid back to the central kind of franchise holder. And I don't know who the franchise holder is. I don't make any claims about that. I know that the oldest and most powerful institutions are probably associated to that franchise holder. So we have to look at things like the Vatican, and where does the Christian religion come from? It comes from Judaism. So whatever Israel represents today, it has to be the old Balfour Agreement, and all of that business has to be, an important marker. And there's Washington D.C. and who knows what goes on in Beijing, and the one of the key planks of this is misdirection. So we've often been sort of pointing our fingers at, say, the Jew or the white man in South Africa, but meantime, they're not pointing their fingers at the black man in South Africa now, are they? I mean, some people are, but not in the mainstream, not in the worldwide press. Oh no. It's the Rainbow Nation, and it's pretty much all good. Any clown will do. So I'm just kind of wanting to take advantage of this opportunity to create that awareness in your mind that the game is rigged. The game is so rigged that your grandparents couldn't see the game, the rig, and if the few that did, they probably wouldn't. They weren't able to make their voice known. Now, when I published my book, Battle on the Lomba, 1987, I published it in 2014, not in 1987. But the publisher thought it would be a good idea to add that in. And there has been further books written since this on the subject. But when I wrote this book, I pretty much bought into the system. Still was buying into the system, hook, line, and sinker. You know, even though I accepted that the ANC had turned out to be a disaster, and the Mandela that I'd hoped would be the sort of savior of the African story turned out to be just another Freemasonic, what do they call it, Knight of Malta, secret society guy who's been, advised by the empire and who knows who else along the way. So, I guess I'm trying to say that, I've done some of the hard yards. This is what I took to war for my country, with a belief that standing by one team and for one team and so on was an admirable thing to do. But I say this to people now: you choose, we all lose. And this is where I see us at, is that people are so stuck in their teams. We've all been given these fake made-up borders. Remember, the franchise holder gets to draw all the borders on the map. So a country like North Korea doesn't get to be recognized on this board map unless King Pong Kong Gong Ying Yang Chung has gone to the board, these franchisees, and paid them their stipend. Or the franchise holders have said, look, we've got this piece of land here, and we want to create this situation. I think they did the same with Cuba. I think that Fidel Castro was nothing more than a stooge, and all the alleged suicide attempts were nothing more than propaganda to inflate this character and make out like he is the enemy of the great Satan. So, it's all dialectic. It's all designed to keep you fighting. I mean, and they'll do it at the small level as well. You'll get some politician will get caught with their hands in the till or their pants down or whatever, and they'll make sure that, even the Bill Clinton business, some suggest that it was created simply to create misdirection and fill the newspaper front pages, whilst they went on and did other shit in Haiti, or was it it was the Kosovo business, wasn't it? Oh my God, and it's like, okay, so we'll allow this despot to get away with it just as long as he then creates the vacuum for us to then. Oh, and where does he get his weapons from? That arms show that they had in Seattle that time. Or Detroit. So it's rigged. The whole game is rigged. And, like the game Monopoly or the game Risk, if you kind of combine these two games, you get a central banker, and they probably call themselves, Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, perhaps, BIS. They get to kind of issue. If you want to be a bank, you have to ask their permission, right? So if you want to be a government, whose permission do you ask? If you want to be a church, do you want to be a religion? Do you have to ask the Pope, the Vatican? Do you have to go there and ask their permission? Because I think they run all the religions. I think that the military sort of thing is handled by Washington, D.C., and that the City of London sort of handles all the financial shenanigans and mismanagement that keeps people poor as much as possible, and it keeps the rich in abject fear that the poor will take their money. And what other bits of the psychology? Oh, of course, well, Hollywood has the the mind control, MK Ultra business wrapped up. So you know, pretty much most of what you watch is designed to keep you in that idea that mankind is just a warring, killer. And all we want to do is play cowboys and Indians, or what's now Christians and Muslims. So I think this is what I've learned in the last 3 or 4 years since I discovered that nothing that they tell us about 9/11, the event that happened on 9/11, very little of that is accurate, and so much of that is misinformation. And when you look at how much has been gained by the system of control, by the franchise holders, from such an event, you know that the who benefits question has to be answered, that, well, the system benefited far more than Islam or Muslimism or whatever. If the idea is to have some kind of war against Islam, then yes, they achieved that aim. But in terms of the control over the rest of people, then I'd say I might have killed my battery. Oh, damn. Or not. Have I just lost my stream? I'll just carry on talking in case you can hear me still. I should wrap this up and say that I want this to be a message of love and a message of hope, actually, because for me to discover more of the truth about our world has been more liberating and more empowering than anything else I've ever done. So I would highly recommend a whole lot of personal research, and from that research start to make up your own mind about how the world really works and how you really work and what you are, and I'll come back, what you are and who you are and why you're important. And if we're ever to end a war or wars or conflict or whatever, then we have to look inside and find what we are inside. Because when we find who we are inside, then we will find out that we are the creator. That we are actually, and this is going to sound like blasphemy to a lot of people who come from a Christian or even Muslim standpoint, but that we are God. We are divine, and we are meant to be having this incredible experience here, enjoying the fruits that this heavenly realm, this place that we've been given to enjoy. But the franchise holders don't want you to do that at all. They don't want you to have that at all. They don't want you to have that freedom. They don't want you to have that expression. And as a consequence, we start to hate ourselves and hate those around us. And it's the antithesis of what we came here for. We came here to raise ourselves, our vibration, call it whatever you like, to a loving vibration rather than one that looks at each other in abject fear. I look at the way that children interact with each other in the playground now, and it's kind of scary, actually, that these children, they treat each other like the adults treat each other like they can't talk to each other, they can't communicate with each other. Interestingly, I noticed that Mediterranean children are far more tactile and in each other's torus field, in each other's space, because their parents, the families are, they're far more kind of connected and so on. But we're going around London now, people almost never want to look at you. We don't want to talk to each other. We regard each other with fear. Women are not allowed to, be seen by men. Some insist on their women wearing. I see so many women wearing, like sheets over their entire body, and just like a little bit of a thing, And I'm not interested in the political debate that the British are trying to stoke at the moment over this. It's another political football along with Brexit that they keep messing with people's minds with. But it's certainly alarming that we've become so mistrusting of one another. So I can't let another man look upon my woman because she may fall pregnant or something. And I can't, trust you because your skin tone is different than mine, or actually where you come from is on a different part of the map, and for that reason, and because not only where you come from, but because your leader from where you come from, your leader, a franchise holder, he is, bad man. So if you want to come to our country, you need to pay extra fees and taxes and so on. This is all absolutely crazy when you realize who we are and where we come from, and so why does it matter? Well, I mean, obviously the idea of having a heaven on earth kind of appeals to me, and one in which I don't have to work 50 hours a week in order to just get by. That's insane. While other people can have, work 50 hours, say, and they can afford to buy themselves a new car. Let's go out and splash on a new Bentley this week. It's been a really cracking week. No, I don't. I don't see the sanity of that. So I think that's the one thing, but that's really not the big deal. The big deal is actually that you are on a divine journey, and this system, its franchise holders, wants to stop you from ever realizing that, because apparently, and this is obviously, now I'm into conjecture. You may think some of the earlier stuff I said was conjecture, but I don't think so. But this is conjecture, and that is that you will have you are creating a mold for your generations to follow. So you can either improve the mold or damage the mold. But what will come in your generational line down the line will be perhaps, let's just say, okay, talk in terms of vibration, low vibration, high vibration. A high vibration, you get an improvement in the mold. The next time you come around, this is conjecture, next time you come around, or your family line is improved in some way, you damage the mold in this journey, or you hold the mold back, and then you come back as a lower vibrating being. Your reincarnation down the line is in a lower vibration, and that means that this system gets more, again conjecture, but more of the order following robot types who will come in more than happy to, this is drool running down, more than happy to be satisfied with the cookery shows and the 9 to 5 and the I'm just a slave and I'm happy. People don't think of themselves like the slave, but I'm just I'm happy to be a lowly worker, on the production line, and that's all I want to be. Sometimes I wonder whether that's why these folks do it, because they need the production line robots, or maybe they're eventually going to get rid of the production line robots altogether, and it'll be actual robots. Then that's why they want to get rid of people. I don't know whether this is just fear porn, and I don't want to get into fear porn, but they do say that we are being targeted, poisoned, and held back for the very reasons that they want this game. We want this game to continue. We want Club Penguin to continue, and that if we all ascend, if we all raise our vibration to some kind of, eventually, over the centuries, to some sort of heavenly kind of thing, that this Sodom and Gomorrah version of the life that we have here will have to go away. It can't exist. So I guess there's some people say, well, we want that. We want to come here and watch porn and gamble and so on. And I guess it's not for me to really be pushing what I feel is the right way, because I've stepped through those hoops. But it's not to say that I don't want a little bit of fun. Would I never watch any porn? Would I never want to go to a casino? I can't say that. I can't really say that, and because I've got to this point where I don't necessarily need those things to make my life feel valuable, then is it for me to kind of shut it out for other people? But I think for me, it's more to do with the truth, you know. It's like you should be told the truth. Hey, this is the truth. You are a divine being. You're here to have a fun time and enjoy it. But if you told people that, then they wouldn't go to their 9-to-5 jobs, would they? Which is why I sometimes find going to my current thing, which is once I left the government and all that crap behind, I had to find a way of making a living with my hands or some other way. Anyway, at the moment I do gardening and not much woodworking anymore, but I do the gardening and whatever else I can to generate some income. But I think that there's a lot more to be done. I think that, the battles we had back in 1987 were just a warm-up. And I don't mean, this is why, I don't mean battling other people and systems. I mean, the inner battle. Because this system has got all of these. It owns. We bought these for the system, basically, with our taxes. And now they've got armies full of these and robot, black-suited policemen and their sidekicks, the plastic police, and the traffic wardens that are now operating as police of a sort. They've got all of that on their side. So, anyone who thinks that they want to go up against that is... well, probably ain't going to find out that they're on their own, because all the big talk that you hear from people going, oh yeah, we'll be there, we'll stand by you. No, not fucking there. People are shitting themselves because they think that the system is so powerful. It's not. Have I told you that my young boy has a passport now without a birth certificate? We told the system he ain't getting no birth certificate. They tried to frighten us. But they've gone away now. Now, it's not about getting belligerent with these order followers, because there is an army of them, and they just, you can spend all day talking to them on the phone, and at the end of I'm sorry, the system says I need to know what your date of birth is, because if I can't get that information, I can't talk to you. Okay? So, whatever you just said, I don't know. I didn't hear it. They don't hear anything, because the system only wants P-shellers. I remember I was working for Westminster City Council's housing department back in the 90s, and they were looking to outsource, hive off the housing stock, 20,000 houses that they owned, and they wanted to start this company, which is now called City West Homes, and it's already infamous for its profiteering. But they wanted to, the process that I was involved in, to do with charging properties for their service charges. The director once said, or some high up said, what we want to do is we want to have this process as simple as shelling peas. And that's all they want. They want pea shellers. They want people who can just sit in the stream and go, well, this is what I do, and I'll do this all day long. No, I can't do that, but I have to pass that down the line. And they do that in medicine, they do that in law, they do that in every sphere, so that no one knows how the whole thing works. Builders, guys in construction. Oh, I've done 5 years, I've got a degree in engineering. Oh, okay, so how does that work in that part? Oh, no, my degree's only in that part. I don't know that part. And this is why we're so ignorant now. And I'm kind of winding up here, so I do apologize for this having taken so long. I'm grateful if you've managed to listen this long. Thank you for that. I honor the fallen in all wars, and I do not disrespect you or your family who've passed on or contributed so much, but you have been lied to. And the wars of World War I and World War II have all been great deceptions, and the lives that have been lost have been thrown to the lions, as it were, on the back of a gross deception. And, the whole business of, is Adolf Hitler the bad guy and Churchill the good guy? If you think in those sorts of terms, then you're completely in the wrong. You're completely in their dialectic of black and white, like these black boys down at the Speaker's Corner. They just think that it's like the white guy is our problem. They think that the white guy won. You should look at the white South African story, If you think that the white guy won, yes, there's still a few white South Africans, a small percentage of white South Africans that are still very wealthy, make no mistake. But if you ever thought that the white guy had won in South Africa, then you should pay a little bit closer attention to what's going on down there. And I think it's going to be the same for the Jewish story and the Israel story in the fullness of time. That these are intentionally created dialectics which will be exploited, along with the dialectic of Islamism versus the Christian soldiers. So I wish you well, and I hope this has been illuminating for you and useful for you in some way. If it's annoyed you, let me tell you that in 2014, a Kurdish barber annoyed me when he told me that ISIS was being funded by the Americans. Even though I'd seen the rebels in Angola being funded by the Americans in 1987. I'd seen it with my own eyes. I'd seen their weapons being used, the Stinger missile, for example. I'd seen it being fired against the Russian planes. The Stinger missile. We weren't allowed to touch it. The South Africans weren't allowed to touch it, but the Angolan rebels, they could have them. And the American CIA boys, they helped them. So I saw that. But when a guy in 2014, a Kurdish guy from that part of Turkey or Kurdistan or whatever, he said that the problem is the Americans are funding the war there, the rebels, the ISIS. I was angry with him. So if you're angry with me now, it's because you're uninformed. That's all, my friend. You're uninformed, like I was back in 2014. Since 2014, it's now 2018, and getting on for 4 years since that conversation. Yeah, 4 years since that conversation with the barber. I have learned more in the last 4 years than I did in the previous 46 years. Yeah, I'm 50 now. At 46, I now say I knew nothing. 100,000 words, published by a British publisher. He promised me a hardback cover, but it never turned out. Nonetheless, the point is that, and Prince Harry wrote me a letter, not personally, his secretary did, but to thank me for handing him a copy over in London one time. So, I was 46, published book, and I knew nothing. I don't care how old you are. If you don't know that there is a franchise holder running the entire game, or franchise holders, there might be more than one. I'm not going to say what and how and what they make up, but there is a franchise holder. If you don't know that, this will make you angry. You can do something about that. You can go back to your TV, pretend that you know nothing, or rather that I've just been talking shit. Or you can turn on your computer and turn off your TV and start researching these things